Do men really prefer submissive women? I mean, it's a question that feels like it's been around forever, but it's also blowing up online right now, sparking all sorts of debate. Today, we're going to cut through all that noise. We're going to look at the science of that first spark of attraction, what psychology says about long-term happiness, and even what some strategists are saying about the whole dating game.
Okay, let's just dive right in with this headline from Tech Times. It pretty much sounds like case closed, right? It's a really bold claim, and it's actually based on a scientific study that looked at what goes down in those first few critical moments when two people meet.
But here's the real question, isn't it? Is that initial spark the same thing that actually keeps a fire going in a relationship? We're going to look way beyond that first impression to see what really leads to satisfaction and, well, happiness in the long run.
So first things first, we've got to understand where that headline even came from. And the evidence for it comes from this really fascinating speed dating experiment. The whole thing was designed to figure out what predicts attraction in just a few minutes. So back in 2016, a study in the journal Human Nature set up this classic speed dating scene. You have 262 people, and they each get exactly 3 minutes to chat before they have to decide yes or no on a second date. The key thing to remember here is the context. This is all about making a super quick judgment.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The researchers didn't just ask people who they liked, they actually looked at their DNA. They zoomed in on two specific genetic markers, one that's been linked to traits like dominance, and another one that's tied to social sensitivity.
And the results were, well, they were pretty wild. Men who had that genetic marker for dominance, they had way more dating success. But get this, women with that same gene were actually less likely to get a match. For women, it was the gene for social sensitivity that got them more yeses, while men with that sensitive trait, they didn't do so well.
So the big takeaway from this first bit of evidence seems pretty clear. In that high-stakes 3-minute dating world, people tended to lean towards partners who fit those old-school gender stereotypes. But, and this is a big but, that's only chapter 1 of this story. So what happens when we switch from that quick first impression to the messy reality of a real established relationship? Yeah, this is where the story takes a pretty sharp turn.
Let's jump to a totally different study. This one's from researchers at Rutgers University, and they looked at 181 couples who were already in it for the long haul. We're talking 21 months on average. They weren't asking about a second date, they were asking about sexual satisfaction and how happy they were in their relationship.
And here it is, the big twist. That same behavior that seems so attractive in the speed dating world, in long-term relationships, it was linked to a negative outcome. The more a woman said she engaged in submissive sexual behavior, the lower the sexual satisfaction was, not just for her, but for her male partner too.
This quote from the people who actually did the study just flips that initial headline completely on its head. It suggests there's this huge gap between what women might think men want and what actually makes for a satisfying relationship for men in reality. So what is going on here? How can something be attractive at first, but then be a problem later? The researchers, they dug in deeper, and they came up with something called a gender role motivation model to really get to the why behind it all.
And what they figured out was pretty profound. It wasn't about the specific behaviors. It didn't matter who initiated or who led. It was all about why a woman was engaging in that submissive behavior to begin with. The motivation was everything.
Okay, this is the core of it, right here. When a woman's submissive behavior was not what she actually wanted, like she felt pressured into it, it had a negative impact on satisfaction for both of them. But if that same behavior was something she genuinely chose, something that matched her own desires, that negative impact completely vanished.
And this wasn't just about what happens in the bedroom. The study found this drop in sexual satisfaction had a ripple effect. It led to feeling less close, to lower relationship satisfaction overall for both people, and, interestingly enough, the connection between sexual satisfaction and feeling close was even stronger for the men in the study. So you've got this complex science. How does that get translated into real-world dating advice? Well, this is where the conversation kind of shifts from psychology to just pure strategy. One source, called The Power Moves, it basically breaks this down into two competing teams. On one side, you have the submissive woman. She's described as feminine, family-focused. On the other side, you've got the strong woman, independent, career-focused, and it frames this as a strategic choice you have to make in the dating market. The argument here is basically just a numbers game. The idea is that since most men, according to this source, prefer to be more dominant,
A woman who is more submissive just has a bigger pool of potential partners to pick from. It's all strategy.
Now, what's really interesting is that the source itself offers this little warning. It suggests that maybe we should be a little skeptical of dating advice, whether it's telling women to be stronger or more submissive, because the person giving the advice might just have their own agenda. They might be trying to make the dating pool better for themselves.
All right, so let's pull all these threads together. We've looked at the genetics of a first impression, the psychology of a long-term relationship, and the strategy of the dating market. So, what's the actual takeaway?
It really comes down to 3 different layers. First, you've got that initial spark, which, might be influenced by some pretty simple traditional stereotypes. But then layer 2, long-term satisfaction, that is not about stereotypes. It's about being authentic, about genuine desire. And then there's that third, strategic layer, which suggests that people might actually consciously play these roles just to get ahead in the dating world.
So at the end of the day, the answer isn't a simple yes or no. Whether men prefer submissive women isn't some fixed thing. It really depends on the context. Are we talking about a 3-minute date or a 3-year relationship? And most importantly, it all comes down to motivation. And that kind of leaves us with a final question to chew on. When you're looking for a partner, what's the trade-off? Do you conform to a role that might give you more options up front? Or do you stay authentic to what you really want, which seems to be the key to long-term happiness for everybody involved? The science seems to suggest you can't really have it both ways.